purpose that he determined, that he thought up and said, yep, this is what I'm going to do. And then it's going to, as mem, you initiate the event, and when it happens, like the tsunami, having accomplished what the aleph purpose was, so it shall come about, so it shall arise, so it shall jump out and happen. That's aleph and tav. So it gives meaning to the word aleph mem tav, emet, where this was the plan, and then you see this picture of this tsunami event, and now the plan is accomplished. And when Yahweh says, as I have purposed, so it shall be, as I have planned, so it shall come about, and Yeshua says, I'm the aleph tav, then what he's basically claiming to be as the plan and the purpose which has accomplished, or will accomplish, or will see to it that it was accomplished, or when the manifestation of himself, the exhibition of his plan is fully accomplished, and when it's complete, then he calls it complete. And then it invokes these other thoughts, and he says, the word which came out of my mouth will not return to me void, it will accomplish whatsoever I set it forth to do. This becomes another model or pattern of what aleph tav means. And then, so to realize, wait a minute, this is Yahweh's signature. His signature verifying that he's the guy putting this out, is he says, this is the way it's going to work. I'm going to give a word, and when the word comes true, you'll know it was me. So 80 times in the book of Ezekiel, he says, such and such is going to happen, and when it does, you will remember I said so, and then you'll know that I am Yahweh. What, we have to wait until it happens to prove it was him. That we never can be sure it was him until after it's come to happen. And when it happens, oh man, we should have listened to that guy. But he says, do we have to wait till it already has happened? By then it's too late? Not if you believe. For example, Moses said, Yahweh said to him, he says, okay, you're going to go back in there, and I'm going to evacuate you guys from Mitzrayim, and you'll come back and worship me on the mountain. And Moshe says, well, how do I know? What's the proof? Can you give me a sign that this is really going to happen, that we're going to come back and worship you on the mountain? And Yahweh says, yeah. The day you're standing here worshiping me on the mountain, that's the sign that what I said is actually going to happen. When you see it happening, you're saying, oh. In other words, when he said it, it ought to be enough because he said it. He said, well, show me another sign. And even Yeshua said, there's no sign going to be shown to you except for the sign given to the prophet Jonah, buried in the earth 3 days and 3 nights, coming spit back out of the earth. Gee, there's another picture of the man in the noon. So you sit there and say, when Yahweh gives his word to his people, he expects it to be enough that we take him at his word. We shouldn't have to have another sign. But how do we know it's his word? How do we know that the word he has told us is true? So you can go to church, you can read in history books, you can read the Vatican II Council, you can read various other things, and you can say, how do we know these are true? They claim to be true. How do we know they're true? Well, you go back to say emet. Now there's another word for truth, which is, I think it's kuf, sheen, tet. I believe it's right. I'd have to double check, but for the sake of the interest of going on. It's the word that's the fletchings on an arrow, which means to keep something flying straight and true, to correct it. So there's another tangent. There's a little symbol down here of a piece of art that I do. We can explain it later, but it's like the fletchings on this arrow. It's like the sword out of his mouth. You could say it's just a blade, but if it's like this arrowhead or the spear, how do you keep the thing straight? So on an airplane, that's actually pretty similar to this flying menorah, you could say, would almost look like the SR-71 airplane. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that. You got this fuselage, and then you've got these wings with the jet shooting out the back. But those wings keep the thing stabilized to fly straight. That's also the word for truth. And my wife found this particular word, which isn't emet, but it said, I think it's in Psalms. I forget the way it's phrased. Something like, I wish I knew this off the top of my head, but anyways, it's something like you've given your word to those who love you because of the truth, or something like that. But so the point is, what do you mean because of the truth? Well, then you have to say, well, what is this word because? Well, there's one word because that's spelled kaf yod. Thus, therefore, but the word for therefore and thus and truly and surely would be kaf nun, which is where we get the word can, like yes I can. It also means to be solid, to be on a pedestal of truth, something that you can count on. And so my point is, you start reading through these words and you say, well, why would kaf yod mean thus or therefore, or in that case? It's also the open hand and the working hand, but it also is a burning or a branding. So you can say, why do these words work this way? So part of my studies is to be looking into Scripture, bumping into certain words, looking at the meanings of the letters, using this red dictionary, which some of you might know about. We can talk about that as a resource of value. But trying to think and put these things together and fitting what we've been given in the New Testament, fitting with what we've been given in the Hebrew and the Old Testament, and if there's a discrepancy between the New Testament and the Old Testament, how do you determine which one to believe? I was talking to one person who said, well, you're filtering the New Testament by using the Old Testament. You're reading something in the New Testament and say, I'm not going to believe it unless it lines up with the Old Testament. And I said, yeah, but you guys do the same thing. You take that white piece of paper in between the Old Testament and you'll filter everything out of the Old Testament with the New Testament in the other direction. If it doesn't line up with the New Testament, you throw the Old Testament out. And it's like, to use the Old Testament as the determining mechanism. What did he give us? Even Yeshua said, you have Moses and the prophets. If you don't believe them, you can't even hear my words. What does that mean? Does that mean, well, we can ignore them and take his words verbatim by themselves? Or is what he said is, listen, I gave you Moshe and I gave you the prophets. You study those. Listen to what they say, and then you'll take what I say and you'll fit them together. But if you don't listen to them, my words won't do anything for you. And then you go back, I believe it's Deuteronomy 13, where he says, if a prophet or a dreamer of dreams says something and it's true, hey, if it's true, that proves us from what? Yahweh, right? Yahweh says, Aleph Tav, if I say it, it's going to happen. So if a dreamer or a prophet says something and it happens, that's proof it's from Yahweh, now we have something. But then Yahweh says, but if that prophet or that dreamer whose words come true speaks to you, hey, let's go and follow phrases Elohim Achrim, gods of others or other gods. Let's follow these other gods, who your fathers, your forefathers did not know. Now who is he referring to? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. If they didn't know this new guy coming into town, and the one who this prophet or the dreamer of dreams is trying to lead you astray to go after them, this is a test from me, he says, to see whether you will quickly stray from the words that I've given you. It's not the devil. It's not even, you can blame the guy saying the words. Yahweh is claiming the authority to be the one who sent this guy to trip us up. So the question is, who planted the tree in the Garden of Eden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? I've heard some people say, it's the devil. The devil planted the tree. You wouldn't have to have the devil plant the tree. It was Yahweh's garden, and if Yahweh planted the tree in the garden, why would he do such a thing? To give us the chance to disobey his words or obey his words. There's this other story we were reading in the parashah a couple of weeks ago, and Moshe was about to go and speak to the rock and bring forth water. And Yahweh says, oh, one more thing, Moshe. Go get the stick. Go get your staff. Remember the one you hit the rock with last time? Why don't you go get it? So Moshe goes and grabs the rock and shows up, and the people are sniveling and whining and giving him grief, and he gets all flustered, and he goes, do we have to give water out of this rock for you rebels? And he smacks the rock with the stick. The rock gushes forth water, and Yahweh says, that's it, Moshe. You stepped out of line, you blew it, you misrepresented me, you don't get to enter the promised land. It's like, why did Yahweh tell him to go get the stick? Why didn't he say, Moses, leave the stick behind? It's like, remember we're talking about, do we know Yahweh's heart? Oh, he knows our heart, but do we know his heart? Why would he stick the tree in the garden? Why would he send a false prophet or a false dream? Why would he tell Moses to go pick up the stick? But don't use it. He didn't even say, don't use it. He said, speak to the rock. But Moses hid it. He didn't say, you're going to get in trouble if you do it. He wasn't a blatant disregard, but he misrepresented. He didn't follow the directions. Why did he, if he knows all things, were Nadab and Abihu predestined to be torched alive on the day of the opening ceremonies of the Mishkan? Nadab and Abihu. There's these incense burners that they go to pick up and say, wow, let's add to the festivities. This would be pretty cool. They light these things up, and Yahweh just nails them with fire, kills them. right in the middle of the opening ceremony. They got their new clothes on and everything was going just fine, and he always says, "You're not going to offer strange fire in my face." Strange fire? What is this strange fire? What he didn't authorize? What he didn't say? What he didn't tell us to do? Is Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Sunday, are these strange fire? And yet we're doing them as if to worship him, like Nadab and Abihu did, with pure intensity of love in their heart and respect for him. They brought strange fire, and he says, no, it's unacceptable. We could sit there and say, boy, but those guys were under the law of law, we're under the law of grace. And so everything's okay. Or so we've been told. So we've been told. How do we know if it's true or not? Then you go to the book of Revelation, and Yeshua said, I hold this against you, speaking of one of the churches. He said that you hold to the teachings of Balaam and Balak, and also the voice or the teachings of the Nicolaitans, which I hate. What's Nicolaitan? Breaks down in Greek to basically, and I heard somebody disagree with this, but just look at the structure of the word Nike laity. Nike, like the footwear, means victory. And laity is like, well, you got the clergy and the laity. What's the clergy? Well, you look up in the dictionary, and the word at the same root base is clergy, clerk, and cleric. The literate ones, those guys know how to read. Well, who's the laity? They're illiterate. They don't know how to read. They don't study Latin. They don't study Greek. Maybe they don't even know English so well. They don't know the words. Victory over the illiterate, as perpetuated by the ecclesiastical authority, who will chain the Bible to the podium, kill you or torture you if you even think to look at it, who banned when the Latin Vulgate and all came out, and Gutenberg printed the English Bible and the German Bible, you even read it. Poke your eyes out. That was it. You're not allowed to look at this stuff. Okay, victory over the laity. Is that who Yeshua was talking about? Well, it doesn't explain it, so we don't know. But then what's the teachings of Balaam and Balak? These were both, I believe, in the book of Numbers, and Balaam was hired by Balak to curse Israel. So he comes in here and it says, Balaam heard from Yahweh. And so Balaam says, Yahweh blessed Israel, I cannot curse them. But then he goes on to say,